Hi folks, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational Next Economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me today on Next Economy Now. I heard about your work through a Civil Eats article. Shout out to Civil Eats. I loved reading that article. I immediately texted a bunch of my friends doing work in agriculture because it's so inspiring. So Noran, would love to hear our listeners. It would be great to hear a little bit of the story of Growing Change and what you're working on, and how you got started.
Sure, and thanks again for making space for us. We are honored to be here from rural North Carolina. So if you're thinking about where we are, we're right on the border of North and South Carolina. That angle between the states was put there to point to us. So it's like an arrow pointing to Scotland County. So I moved back to my hometown of Laurinburg in 2000 to take care of my mother, who was an Alzheimer's victim. And coming in as a newly minted mental health therapist, so I'm a clinical social worker, an LCSW, and I had years of experience working both before grad school and then through grad school, working with young people who came out of challenged backgrounds. Moving back to a low-wealth rural area, I was stunned at the lack of resources we had and the negative impacts that caused. So frankly, we were losing young people to the adult correctional system or worse. Whereas when I was in certain urban areas, just had more tools to work from. That kind of came to a head in 2008, and I had to try to start thinking about how, as a mental health therapist, I wanted to have impacts. I felt like in some ways I was failing the youth that I was working with, and in some ways the whole system was failing those youth. So as a person of faith, I began praying and the disciplined way, and you just better be careful what you pray about, because it was from that time, driving around 3 rural counties, I began noticing that in every county I drove through, there was this closed prison in the county. And if I drove a little bit further on some of the trips out, there was 4th prison. And then I discovered that if you put a pin in Laurinburg and you drew a circle with a 50-mile radius, you would have 6 decommissioned units just in that area. And it caused me to begin asking about the history of how North Carolina used more forced prison labor than any other state to build its road system. This was part of the Good Roads movement. And now these units, because of consolidation, but also because of a dropping prison population in North Carolina, because of sentencing reforms that had finally gone through, these small units were closing. And so North Carolina is an interesting place. It's ground zero for the country to try to answer the new question of what to do with old prisons. And so in 2011, we started working with a group of young people. Those are the originals And the originals were selected to be part of a clinical pilot program. So these were young men who had been kicked out of home, kicked out of school, and put on probation at age 14 or below. And in my field, we call that the unholy trinity. These are the young men upon which the adult correctional system is built. So we began forming up Native American, African American, Latinx, white youth, and to bring them together to help us try to get this right. Now, in the beginning, we just began working in community gardens. We helped several community gardens along the way get started or keep going. And in that process, we would just go out and garden together as a group, especially during the summers, of course. We'd work till about noon, hit the swimming hole, go out to eat. And let me say, going out to eat was an incredibly important clinical step for us. And then we would have group meetings. At the beginning, when we would talk to the youth, or when I would talk to the youth about we're going to help them turn their future around, because if they got real with you, they would tell you that they expected to be locked up or worse by the time they're into their mid-20s. Expected at age 14, 15, 16 years old. So with that expectation, we told them we're going to try to create a program together to help them reverse that future or to help them flip their prison. And I think to the man, they thought that was really corny or lame at that point. And I thought I was a very swift therapist at that point. But then we walked them through, started taking tours of the closed field camp prison there in Scotland County, and explained that we were recruiting youth and putting youth at the central part of our leadership, which Ravin and Norman will tell you about in a few minutes, for us to get this right. So this is a youth-empowered model for how we take these field camp prisons and turn them into sustainable farms and community resources where we can generate jobs through a triple bottom line approach, where we're respecting the planet, where we are serving the needs of the people, not only the youth that we're diverting from the system, but helping to feed hungry neighbors, helping to instill hope in an area where hope is kind of a dangerous notion sometimes. And finally, we built into the model earned revenue streams through the farming and hopefully some other means in the future. Pretty modest operation right now, but through the rotational grazing, our pasture poultry program is already in the black, and through our livestock, we're break-even a process. And right now we are running free CSAs during the days of COVID. But I'll turn it over to the experts to kind of bring us up to speed as Ravin and Norman came in our second wave of youth leaders.
Thank you so much. I got chills. I mean, the notion that you're turning closed prisons into food security and youth empowerment is so inspiring. Norman, so tell us a little bit about what you do, and also you talk about the organizational component, how you work together and how the leadership is structured. So free to add to that.
I feel like I'm just a part of the team. The team either works on a project together or we work on smaller projects that overall come together for one, and we get our goal done for the day or the week, whatever the goal is that time. So one of the more smaller projects that I would lead is beekeeping. I do that with Ravin, and we both lead that. But then we also work on rotational grazing, like it was said before, on composting. We work on with the livestock. We get the eggs from the chickens or feed the sheep we have. So overall, we can work by ourselves, but also in times that we need everybody, we all come together and work as a whole. We take a vote practically, and we try to work with everyone's opinions and try to please as many as we could, but we also want to make progress in a way. So we take votes on stuff, and it's mostly the youth, the votes that we are given maybe the options, but we decide at the end of the day. So it gives us a voice, because I feel like we're in a period that we're not children, but we're also not adults. So we're kind of just trapped. This gives us an opportunity to have a voice.
Thank you, Norman. And Ravin, by way of introduction, and we'll come back to both of you, could you share a little bit about what you do and anything else you'd like to share for our listeners to help them kind of imagine what's it like doing the work that you're doing in this world?
like Norman said, we each have our own specific roles and fields we specialize in at Growing Change. But just because we have our own fields doesn't mean we're uncomfortable to step into a different field at the farm. Like some days Noran may make one of us feed the chickens or collect the eggs or go check on this, go do this. But that doesn't mean that we'll be doing that every day because see, what I like about that is it makes sure we're specialized in everything. Like, so day one when we walked into Growing Change, Norman and I, there were 3 days. I like to classify these 3 days as the beekeeping days because these 3 days were when Norman really introduced us to beekeeping. So day one, walking into Growing Change, Norman pulls Norman and I to the side and he's like, okay, so what do y'all know about bees? And me, hearing the word bees, it just terrifies me because I'm terrified of bees. So what Noran says is, Ravin and Norman, I want y'all to film this segment for our video series, and I want y'all to start talking about beekeeping. And so he gives us these beehive frames, and he gives us this beeswax, and he's like, okay, I want you to coat this beeswax on these frames for our video series, and then tomorrow I want you to do something too. So day one, we coated these beehive frames, and then day two, our friend Shannon from Cooperative Extension, which is this fellow group of ours, she taught us a little bit more about bees, her being the beekeeping expert. And she just gave us a little bit of some tips and tricks about, what color to wear, what things bees like, what things bees don't like. And we watched Noran and her replace this beehive at our local farm. And then day three, Norman and I actually got hands-on, and we replaced a beehive of our own at Shannon's house. And so that's just one of my most memorable experiences because at the start of Growing Change, before joining Growing Change, I was terrified of bees. But then after that, I really didn't mind anymore. And it's just an example of how Growing Change has familiarized me with certain things.
Amazing. There's so much to go into here. And, one of the questions that's coming up for me, and feel free to anyone who wants to answer this, I'm curious what drives you on a daily basis? What is kind of the inspiration, or what excites you, what keeps you going? I mean, you mentioned the ability to have this sort of generalized suite of skills that is so important, right? And so kind of underappreciated. I don't know if Ravin or Norman, do you have ideas on how to respond to that?
I'm just going to say this, and if Ravin doesn't agree, then that's on him. But I want to say Miss Easter drives me. That's our donkey. She just drives me every day. I got to go over there and feed her, And then the rest is just, all right. No, I feel like, on a serious note, I feel like what really drives me is just the idea and the plan that we have for the prison. Because, one, it's unheard of. It's unheard of. And it's also something that we need. There's so many closed prisons in the U.S., and they're just sitting there. So this is something that needs to be done. And it can be done not only in North Carolina, it can be done all over. That's the reason I go every day.
I love that. Our listeners are certainly right now looking for solutions that you all are building around how we transition from this, injustice system, one could call it, into a future where all voices can be heard and people can have meaningful employment and meaningful contributions and move into more regenerative agriculture and social dynamics too.
Yeah, exactly. So we're taking these rusting tools of injustice and thinking about how we redeploy them to become tools for justice, true justice. And so, that it's just been an incredible opportunity our coalition partners have been stunning. If you are in low wealth, rural America, we don't often get an opportunity to sit at the table. We don't have the focused funding and philanthropy that many of our urban neighbors enjoy. And let's be frank, it's hard all over right now. But low wealth rural America is arguably the least served section of our country. And being from here and moving back to here and seeing the struggle, we have to innovate. And so the social entrepreneurial opportunity, especially wrapped around sustainable farming, helps us to be able to develop, this idea so that we can give it away to the 300 communities in the U.S. trying to figure out what to do with a closed prison, right? It's not something we even think about. It's not even in the national consciousness that we have 300 closed prisons. And many of these are in low wealth, rural America. So I see them as points of opportunity. So in that way, our youth leaders are helping us. Like, for example, Thursday, we'll begin a new project with our team at MIT to start helping to lift up some work that we're doing that's going to be run in the National Architectural League. And it's those opportunities that really help me get through the difficult times, because this is a very modest operation. You know, we're a 501c3. We're based in and focused on what to do with these closed prisons, especially in low wealth rural America. And so that's a hard row to hoe, if you would. But it's the youth and the power of that innovation that I think helps keep me going.
Ravin, what drives you?
What drives me is living in the South. I've never heard anything like this. You know, transforming a closed prison into a sustainable farm. It just sounds completely foreign to me. I never thought that this would be a thing, and just to be a part of that opportunity, it makes you feel like you're a part of something. And it's something that can be big, because when we create a platform off of it, it's an example for lots of people across America who live near prisons, and it later in the future or even now could inspire people to create change just like we're trying to do. So that's what keeps me going.
What are some of your biggest successes around this project that you'd like to share? And whoever wants to share first.
Norman, you got to talk about saving Miss Daisy.
So Miss Daisy was the baby sheep that we got, and she was the youngest one. She was the smallest one, and she got sick.
Is this a cow we're talking about? Just so
the sheep.
Sheep. Okay, great.
Yes.
I want to make sure our listeners can picture it.
So I go into work that day, right? And this time we didn't start the farm. We were at Noran's house. And he says, all right, I'm going to be right back. Just go in the back and you'll see something. And all right. So I just go in the back and I see a sheep. It's just sitting there. I said, baby sheep. I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I just knew it was it. I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about. So then that day, it was a lot of firsts. First, it was putting a diaper on the sheep. Very interesting. It works. And then it was taking the sheep to a veterinarian. Super cool. And weird looks, but not like why, more like interested. But it was fun. And then we found out that she probably ate something bad and that she had gotten coccidia. So we had to treat her for coccidia. And then in order to like contain her so she's not roaming around, or just roaming around, we put her on this pink harness. And when she was brought back to the farm, our garden donkey, Miss Easter, she didn't like the harness very much. And she chased the Miss Daisy, the sheep, and trying to stomp on her. And so we had to save her again from that. So it was just a lot of saving Miss Daisy had to go through. But fortunately, she reacted well to the medicine, and we took the harness off, and now she pretends she doesn't know us anymore. She just roams around with her herd. It was a long day. It was a really good day, though.
Mm.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you never imagine. Like, I'd never imagine in my life that I would be taking a baby sheep, to a veterinarian. But it's one of those things like, yeah, you can say that, you can brag about it, you know? It's like, oh yeah, have you taken a baby sheep? No, you haven't. But yeah, so it's one of those opportunities that I got to have.
And Norman and Ravin were working with the first Lumbee Native American nation in our area is the Lumbee Nation, the first Lumbee veterinarian. And so he went through Tuskegee way back in the day. And so he took them back and let them do microscope work and et cetera. So both Norman and Ravin, I believe, will find themselves in the medical fields in the future. So it's an interesting kind of overlap or cross-training when they're helping our veterinary science piece.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Is there anything you'd like to share about working with animals, particularly for our listeners? Many of them might not know about rotational grazing or pastured animals. Could you share a little bit about that and why it's important?
Rob, you want me to do that, or do you want to do that?
I can talk a little bit about it. So in order to get the rotational grazing process working, one of the projects that we had to tackle was creating this shade structure. And basically, rotational grazing is where we have these big animals and we pull them around our pasture in order to fertilize the soil. And then we also have smaller animals behind them. And then so basically what that is doing is it's making the soil fertile, and it's really just a really efficient process. And so our shade structure, it was for the bigger animals that would need shade in the middle of the process on the outside of the perimeter. And so this shade structure, it was this big slope with a wheel system. It was a lever wheel system. So whenever we need the shade structure to be stationary, we would be able to do that. And then whenever we needed to be moving, we could do that as well. I know it took either a month or a little over something around that. But it was a really nice project, and it was one of the first projects that I remember, because I remember the day that we got finished with the project, we had a day where Noran invited some of our fathers out to help pull the shade structure out of the perimeter, because getting it through the gate was one of the struggles that we encountered. That's one of my memorable experiences with our projects.
And Ravin, how old are you? Would you be willing to share that with the listeners?
Yes, I am 17.
Amazing. And how old are you, Norman?
I'm also 17.
You two have more skills than the average adult. That's so amazing. What are you learning right now that you'd like to share? Or like, what's a place that you're like, oh, I wish I want to learn more in this area, because this is a challenge for me right now.
We have a slogan, fail often, but fail small. When you are a bootstrap nonprofit doing something like this, your frustration tolerance better be pretty strong. And that's really useful for us in helping the youth kind of further develop that. So fail often, fail small. That just makes me think of the prototype for the chicken tractor, if you guys want to lean into that.
Norman, you want to do it, or you want me to do it?
You can start by the first prototype, and I'll continue it.
Okay. So we had two versions of this chicken tractor, or two attempts, I'll say. So the first attempt dealt with, we created this wheel lever system. Again, we had 4 wheels. So basically our entire structure was made out of wood. And so this chicken tractor basically pulled these smaller animals, because this is also a part of the rotational grazing. It pulled these smaller animals, which were the chickens, in this tractor. So it was a chicken tractor, as we call it. And so the struggle that we came across was, well, first of all, it wouldn't fit through the gate in an easy way. Second of all, it was way too heavy. And after, I say, a good couple of weeks of trying to maneuver around the problems, we eventually decided to just let that project go and try and recreate the chicken tractor. And Norman, you can talk about how we recreated it.
And just for our listeners, this is not an actual tractor, right? This is like wheels, and you built it, like you built it out of wood or something, and you're building something that the chickens can be moved in, and yeah.
Correct. So then our main issue was the weight and the measurements. So we took the measurements of the gate. We took them a couple times to make sure. And then we started thinking of what our material would be in order to make it portable, because like Ravin said, it was too heavy to be moved. So it was just not portable. We needed to be portable, as it would be moving behind the bigger animals. So we decided to use PVC pipes, right? Like really, really thick PVC pipes as like the frame. So the chicken tractor version 2 was built out of PVC pipes. It had chicken wire, and also we used metal, like it wasn't metal. We bent metal in order to create the roof, like a circular roof, because they need a roof in order to prevent them from like getting wet or just from escaping as well. And I feel like the heaviest thing on that might have been the door, because the door was made from wood. Other than that, it was super lightweight. I believe we did get the wheels attached, and I think it should be up and running.
I want to welcome your listeners to track us on growingchange.org, because the guys are about to start probably one of the most unusual DIY series in the country, How to Flip Your Prison. The title is subject to change, but we'll see what the guys settle on. And so they're going to walk you through a DIY kind of homeschool video series on the different issues that we're doing. So we'll teach you aerated static composting, or share what we've learned in the pastured poultry coop production, the composting in general. And during that time, it also allows us to talk about our larger work around keeping young people out of the prison system. I think it's also important to note that, it was the original youth that we brought together who were kicked out of home, kicked out of school, and put on probation at a young age. And over the 5-year clinical pilot program, we were 92% effective. 92% effective in preventing entry into the adult correctional system. 92%. So for us, I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments that we've been able to pull off. And during that time, after that clinical pilot program, we moved from proof of concept to model demonstration. So really, we moved on to the farm in late 2017, early 2018. So really, we're developmentally, we're kind of new. And so this is the opportunity to pull all that information together, not only for the DIY video, but also for that prison flip toolkit, that open source model that we're sending out to the other communities. Growing Change, we're not trying to put our flag. We're not even crossing county line in one of those neighboring closed prisons right around us. We're trying to lift up grassroots groups around the country to give them the resources and then join together in an open source community. We believe that that's going to potentially even go beyond systems change, even maybe some frame change conversations for the country. Because think about this. We're at this moment in history and people are rising up and reclaiming some of the common space and removing monuments that are inappropriate. Now think about 300 closed prisons. Think about if the right people take back that land and build something new to help create the jobs, to help feed our neighbors, to help basically instill hope. Now that's the kind of innovation that we're going for.
Wow. I'm glad you mentioned the kind of community aspect, because I know we only have a few more moments here, but I wanted to ask, a lot of our listeners are really struggling, frankly, right now with how do we communicate across differences, across biracial lines, across socioeconomic class lines. And from what I understand, your team has diversity. You're Black, Indigenous, Latinx. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to, what's that like? How do you work with that? How is it easy in some ways or hard in others? What's been that experience for you? I think our listeners could learn a lot from you.
I'm going to set Ravin and Norman up a little bit before to clarify that. So our originals had to fit that criteria. And then the youth decided that after the clinical pilot program was done, that the youth would recruit other youth that came in just with different forms of struggle. But to be in our leadership team, you have to understand struggle. So I think the communication kind of starts with the understanding of struggle. And so, for example, in Norman and Ravin's case, they haven't been incarcerated. They live at home with stable families. And they know very well in this modern day, with all the rancor that we're dealing with, what it is to navigate multiple ethnic identities and sometimes even national identities within your families. And so they're uniquely kind of our ambassadors to kind of talk about some of this or help us think about how we have conversations around diversity during these days.
I feel like our communication is naturally strong. Like, we each understand that we each have our own struggle, and that kind of gives us a sense of unity. It's rare that we disagree on something big, but there are some small disagreements, like in any other group. Like, oh no, let's go right. I want to go left. But simple stuff. It's not nothing huge. And there's really not anything that challenges the group when it comes to disagreeing. It's more, we often try to find something that fits all of us. So, for example, I'm going to get on Ravin here a little. He's a vegetarian. And he's smiling right now, but because I know he knew I was going to say something. He's a vegetarian, so whenever we go out to eat, we have to make sure there's a vegetarian option for him. And we might joke around, and there's someone else in our group that is allergic to tomatoes. So even though we might joke around saying, oh yeah, I forgot, you can't eat tomatoes, we're like, oh here, just have a slice of pizza. And even though we might joke around, we still respect each other. We still find a place that suits everybody's needs. That just suits everybody in general. So I feel like our communication is it's strong because of where we come from, what we've been through, and there's just a sense of respect within each other.
Thank you. Ravin, you wanna add or?
Yeah, like Norman said, I feel like Growing Change is just a place where everyone can bond together. And it's like a breath of fresh air whenever you may have problems in the world. And we don't necessarily always have to talk about those problems at group, but it's just a place where you can voice your opinion if you have to say something. Like whenever we have group, we talk about our problems or whatever, just how's life going if some of the members, we haven't seen them in a while. Or, if a particular day, one of us is not, in the best mood, like it'll just going to work and just bonding and then going out to eat at the end of the day after a hard day's work. It's a really good experience. And it's like I said, a breath of fresh air from, school. And if you have problems at home or whatever is going on in your life that you may not want to talk about.
Well, thank you so much. As we close this interview, we always like to ask at the end, how can we support you? We being the listeners, we being Lift Economy. I even didn't know that you have this kind of open source model, and I'm so inspired and grateful, just tremendously humbled and grateful for you, for that vision that you're putting forward in the world. How can we support you to accomplishing this vision? Whoever wants to go first, and I'd love to hear from each one of you. What support do you need? What can we do? How can we help?
Well, obviously, it's it's my job to to say to your listeners, if any of this has inspired you today, and if you do want to help the United States answer the new question of what to do with old prisons in the country that locks up more of our citizens than any other developed nation in the world, you want to help rethink that during these days of change, please consider donating. We're a 501c3. We have PayPal on our website, growingchange.org. And if not to us, please try to get involved with the decarceration movement in general. That is central to the civil rights questions that we're asking right now. We have to decarcerate. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time.
I feel like a way the listeners can help us, and what you're doing is already helping us. You're getting our message out there, and you're getting us out there, sharing our message and sharing our goal of what we want to do. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, and for your listeners, just share with a friend, share the story, share our story with a friend.
I feel like with what you're doing right now with this podcast, it's already doing enough in helping us. And I feel like to the people who are out there listening to this, I feel like, just like Norman said, tell a friend about it. Share this podcast. Show your mom, your grandma, whoever, about what these people in North Carolina are doing to transform this abandoned prison into this sustainable farm, because that will really help us just to get our voice out there on social media, because that's the future. Social media is the future. And I want to thank you for this opportunity.
So just to clarify, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube channel, will be the home of our DIY series, and Twitter. The guys have been very patient in teaching the old man some of these new tricks. So.
Well, it really has been an honor spending time with all of you today. I know our listeners are going to be in awe of the work you're putting in to transform systems of oppression, and really, really grateful. Really grateful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. And we will talk again soon. Be well. And I can't wait to check out the DIY YouTube channel.
Take care. Thank you.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.